Do you believe Paul Castellano drove us crazy over $700 worth of chickens? He said, man, that's what kind of guy it is. When it comes to money, forget about it with Paul. If we had social media back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, all over social media, every single day, you would have seen something about myself, my former associates, my father, Gotti, you name it. It would have dominated social media because every day in the newspaper, you read about some of us. A lot of times they say that Gotti caused the downfall of, the Mafia in New York. And I disagree with that. It's going to make your hair stand on end when I get into this. And I'm telling you this, there's a lot of influencers out there that create these dynamic things just to get views and clicks. I don't do that. I'm going to give you facts. I'm going to give you information. And I'm going to dare anybody that I'm talking about to sit with me on it because I'm going to show them the proof. I'm going to accuse them to their face. Very significant day. 40 years ago today, Paul Castellano was killed. Shockwaves. We're going to get into it a little bit further. Hey everyone, welcome to another sit down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody is doing well. All is very good, very blessed on this end. And as always, my friends, I give all the praise, honor, glory, and thanksgiving to our God for that, especially through this Christmas season. We're going to be celebrating the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ, and always a great time of the year. Very, very blessed. I wish all of you tremendous blessings this time of the year, and of course, going into the new year. We celebrate anniversaries all the time, wedding anniversaries. We celebrate birthdays, kind of an anniversary of our birth. We celebrate a lot of anniversaries. And today, December 16th, is an anniversary, an infamous anniversary. 40 years ago today was the day that Paul Castellano was shot and killed in front of Sparks Steakhouse in New York. And it was a big, big deal back then. It certainly was. And, I was deeply entrenched in the life. So when that happened, the shockwaves were felt all over New York, so to speak. I remember it. I distinctly remember it. This time was not a good time of the year for me because 3 days later, I was indicted by the Eastern District of New York on a major racketeering case that I eventually took a plea and did my time on. So I was very aware of what happened during that time. And I'm sure many of you do. There's been movies about it. We've heard much about this over the past 40 years. People that follow me, I'm sure, are aware of what went down. Everybody that is into the mob genre, I'm sure, is very aware of this. We've heard from other people. We've seen the movies. One movie that I always recommend that you watch with respect to this is the 1996 HBO Gotti movie, which is brilliant film. Don't mix it up with the later one with Travolta. This one was with Armand Asante and Anthony Quinn. Brilliantly done. I've been saying that for years. And it talks about, obviously, the Castellano hit with John Gotti and all that stuff back then. So watch it again. You can get it on YouTube for free. And I'm sure if you haven't seen it, you're going to say it's one of the best mob movies you've ever seen. And great, great performances by Armand and Anthony Quinn, no doubt. But I want to go back and talk about this time because it meant a lot to me back then. It really did. It was kind of, I was in the decision-making process at that point in time. I obviously had been a part of that life for quite some time and grew up in it with my dad and saw that the RICO statute was really doing damage. And I said, you know what? This life is in trouble right now. It really is. There's no doubt about it. You get the Castellano hit, on the 16th of December, and there were shockwaves throughout the whole, mob scene in New York at that point in time. We all suspected John Gotti of doing it. We knew that there was rumbling on the street. So we all kind of knew that, it wasn't announced in any way, but we all kind of knew that. And let me give you a little history on Paul Castellano. I had a personal history with Paul Castellano from early on when I was a recruit. I might have told this story before, but I'll tell it again. The world doesn't need another wine. It really needs a reason to raise a glass again. A reason that's real. A reason that means something. Because most people, they drink to forget. We drink to remember where we came from, what we stand for, and who we still fight to become. We don't follow trends, we break them. Our bottles don't look like anyone else's because our story It isn't like anyone else's. It's about freedom, about redemption, about family. That's what's inside every bottle. So, to the ones who think different, who live different, who drink different, salute. I had a market. I was young. I was a recruit. It was early 1970s. And I had a market out in Long Island in Suffolk County, and I called it Sonny's Market. And it was a market where we sold fruit and vegetables. We had a meat counter, we had a fish counter, the whole bit. And at that time, I was told to buy my chicken from Paul Castellano. He was in that business, him and his family. And I was buying chickens from Paul Castellano for quite some time. Well, it was a Memorial Day weekend. And that weekend, we got some big orders. People are barbecuing, you know, they're having the 3-day weekend celebration. And so I ordered a lot of chicken for a woman that wanted to buy it from us, and we sold it to them. Well, the day after Memorial Day, it was a Tuesday, this woman came back and said, listen, these chickens were bad. There was maggots in the chicken. Whoa. So it was like a big order at that time, $700-800 that she ordered. She was at a huge party, right? So I called up Castellano's guy. It was his nephew or something. I don't remember. Maybe his brother. I don't remember at the time. And I said, listen, the chickens were bad, so we need I'm not going to pay for them. I said, no, you're going to pay for them. They were good when we sent them to you. I said, listen, we have a refrigerator here. You only got them on Friday or Saturday. We sold them immediately, and the chickens were bad. I'm not paying you for them. Well, he got a little crazy with me on the phone, and I responded, you know, F you here, F you there. Back then, I wasn't a Christian, and we went back and forth. And I hung up on him. Well, I think it was a day or two later, I get called by my captain at the time, Andrew Russo, and he said, I need to see you, get into Brooklyn right away. So I go, and I sit down with him and Tom DeBella, who was the acting boss, and he tells me, tell me what happened with these chickens. I said, you got to be kidding. I said, no, tell me what happened, Andrew said. So I tell him, and he said, do you know who that is? That's Paul Castellano's nephew, uncle. I don't know what he was, but he was related to Paul, closely related. I said, okay, so you know what? He sold me bad chickens, and I didn't want to pay for them. He said, well, Paul is very upset. He says that you were very disrespectful to his relative on the phone, who happened to be a made person, by the way. He's a made guy. And, you know, you're not supposed to talk like that. I said, well, you know, what do I know? I didn't check him out. You know, we're going back and forth. He started with me first. So we go with the sit down with Paul Castellano over these chickens. It's me, Andrew Russo, you know, the underboss, acting underboss at the time. The boss, you know, Tom DeBella at the time, acting boss for Persico at the time. Paul Castellano was there and his guy. Again, I'm sorry, you know, this is like a long time ago. I forget. So Paul is very upset with me. How dare you talk to my guy like that? He's a made guy. I'm back and forth, and they were arguing back and forth. And I said, well, listen, they were bad chickens, and, you know, I didn't want to pay. I thought that was the right thing. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. But they told me, you know, just apologize and don't say anything more. That's what Andrew told me. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The resolution was this. I didn't have to pay for those chickens, but I had to continue using Paul's company to buy my chickens from. And it was other stuff too. I said, okay, no problem. So they kind of scolded me, you know, when we got into the car. They said, you know, you don't ever talk to somebody that you don't know. He was a made guy. This could have been very serious. Paul is a boss. He was very mad. The whole bit like that, right? And then they bust out laughing in the car. Do you believe Paul Castellano drove us crazy over $700 worth of chickens? He said, man, that's what kind of guy it is. When it comes to money, forget about it with Paul. That was my early recognition of who Paul was and that he was all about the money, you know, back then. I'm sorry. I learned it early on as a recruit. So now we get into what happened on December 16th. The undercurrent of that, I think you know, but I'll tell it again. John Gotti had his crew, his brother Jeannie, Angelo Ruggiero, and according to what we know, they were dealing drugs. We weren't allowed to deal with drugs. I've said this time and time again. Carlo Gambino put that order in place. No drugs for the Gambino family. Persico did the same thing, and we weren't supposed to be involved with drugs. That was it. They said if you get involved in drugs, you die, or you get your position taken away from you. It could have been very, very serious. Well, they're dealing in drugs allegedly on the street. Let's put it that way. Paul Castellano finds this out. Okay, that wasn't a good thing. That wasn't an immediate cause of problems, but he didn't like Gotti and Gotti's crew for that reason, from what we were told. Then it goes a little bit further. There's an indictment that comes down on Paul Castellano. And allegedly that indictment was fueled by a wiretap on Angelo Ruggiero's phone. Now, Angelo Ruggiero was was a soldier under John Gotti. And they called him Quack Quack, remember? Because he talked. I knew Angelo well. I'll tell you a little story about Angelo, too. And so now the indictment comes down, and Paul Castellano is asking Neil Della Croce, who Gotti was very close with, for the tapes that Angelo Ruggiero had, the wiretaps, because he had to get him in discovery. Well, they don't want to give them to Paul because the tapes were very damaging. John and Angelo, they were talking very negatively about Paul Castellano. Could have got him in real trouble, could have got him killed. So they're trying not to give up the tapes. I think John was honest with Neil and told him, Neil, look, we're going to be in trouble if he hears these tapes. Quack Quack, he talks. And we weren't saying good things about Castellano. Paul keeps pushing him for some reason. Neil was able to hold Paul Castellano up in giving up those tapes. He was able to hold him up until we got closer to the trial, or they got closer to the trial. But he had to give him up at some point. Paul was going to know about it, and that would have been really dangerous. So John, realizing this, we got to strike first. That's what happens in that life. If you know somebody's out to get you, you got to make the move first. Okay, so I will say that. But what happens is, according to what we knew on the street, Gotti did not he's taken out a boss. You got to get okay from the commission, from all 5 families. You just can't do it. You got to get permission. He wasn't able to get the permission from Chin, who was a very powerful figure, from Fat Tony Salerno, the Genovese. He wasn't able to get permission. From what I was told, Persico didn't give him permission either. He didn't like it. You don't take out a boss like that. So he didn't get everybody's permission, but he went together. He went on with the hit anyway. I don't have to lay this out again. You know the story. Sammy Gravano, he told the whole story of how it happened because he was intimately involved in that. Okay, they set it up at Sparks, the steakhouse in Manhattan. Bellotti and Castellano. Bellotti was the underboss. Remember, Castellano passed over Neil Della Croce to be his underboss. And Gotti was very upset with that. Very, very upset with that. Well, what happened, Neil dies in early December. Now, when Neil dies, John knew he was in trouble because he had to give up those tapes. And once he gave up those tapes, it was over for him and his crew. He knew that. So he acted first. But again, he didn't get permission from all of the bosses in New York. So some people didn't like what he did, especially Chin. He was upset, and so was Persico. I remember him because I talked about it with him when we were in MDC together shortly after this happened. He wasn't a fan of Gotti's, quite honestly. So now they do the hit in front of Sparks. You've seen it 1,000 times, don't have to go over it. And boom, Shockwaves, Castellano's hit all over the news, everywhere. That's all you heard. I have to tell you something. I got to interject. If we had social media back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, all over social media, every single day, you would have seen something about myself, my former associates, my father, Gotti, you name it. It would have been it would have dominated social media because every day in the newspaper, you read about some of us every single day. New York Post, New York Daily News, Long Island Press, Newsday, all the papers. Every single day there was something about one of us, one of the family. Who knows? If there was social media back then, mob stuff would have dominated social media. Guaranteed. Now, we wouldn't have been on it, no question, but other people would have capitalized on it the way they capitalize on things today. People outside of the mob, maybe, the Jerry Capicis of the world, the reporters, they would have been all over talking about it because we dominated, the media during that time. But still, front page of every paper, Castellano was hit, so on and so forth. I'll never forget. 3 days later, I'm in MDC. A lot of guys were locked up during that time, and Paul was on trial during that time. So this stuff was coming out, or he was about to go on trial, something like that. But man, it sent shockwaves, and a lot of things changed. We know what happens. Gotti gets promoted to be the boss of the family. And what happens there? You know, he was immediately targeted because everybody, the FBI, you know, they had their, they knew that it was Gotti right off the bat. So now the quest was proving that Gotti was involved in the Castellano hit. Now, you know, a lot of times they say um, that Gotti caused the downfall of, you know, the Mafia in New York. And I disagree with that. It was RICO that caused the downfall. RICO did the damage, and Giuliani led that charge, no doubt about it. But Gotti didn't help because after the Castellano hit, I mean, the intensity on Gotti was, forget it. It was off the charts because they knew. And when the intensity came on Gotti, well, it stimulated all of the FBI, of course, to go after everybody. It reawoke, I would say, not that they weren't on top of it, because remember back then, I believe there were 12 to 1,400 agents that worked all five families. And among the five families, we had about 750 made guys. So you had almost two agents for every family member. And of course, we had a lot of associates. But that's how intense the FBI was and the Department of Justice on the mob back then. So the Castellano hit just made it even more intense, no question about it. And of course, Gotti and his crew suffered the most damage as a result of that, but it was widespread among all of the New York families. Now, let me say this about Castellano. I don't believe he was well liked. You know, Andrew Russo, again, the acting underboss, and Tom DeBella were pretty close with Castellano. Now, how do I know this? Because oftentimes, as I was a recruit, and then later on when I got made, I would drive them to meet Paul Castellano quite often. I was their driver, and I would take them around. They met with them a lot, and I think they had a pretty good relationship. I do, at that time. As a matter of fact, I know they do. They did. But he wasn't well liked, Paul. He was seen more as a business guy, that he wasn't really a street guy. If you watch Gotti 1996 HBO, you'll see that comes out. Neil Delacroix, played by Anthony Quinn. He says it in a sit-down that they're having. You're not a street guy. Come on, you're a business guy. And he was very tight with money. Very, very tight. I think at one point in time, they said that, you know, he was taxing his crew. 10% of all the money that they made on the street had to be delivered to him at his Staten Island home, which they called the White House at that time. People were even insulted, I remember, because a lot of people said that he wouldn't even invite them into the house. Just leave the envelope and go. And they resented that. And then I believe he raised his tax, if you want to call it, to 15%. And a lot of the men were upset about it. So Gotti, within the family, did have support for killing Castellano. He did, within his family. Not all outside of the family, but within his family, he did have support. So, you know, when he was shot, a lot of people were happy about it. Hey, who cares? You know, he wasn't a street guy. It was this or that. And, you know, another thing happened, an incident happened. You know, it was found out that he had to get, he had erectile problems and he had to get that fixed. And it became news on the street. And when that happened, people lost respect for him even more. He was having a relationship with his housekeeper at that time. He was married, having a relationship with his housekeeper that people didn't like. So there was things about him that, hey, you know what? Nobody's going to miss him kind of a thing. I think a lot of people were upset, Gotti especially, when Neil Delacroix was passed over by Carlo Gambino and when he put his brother-in-law, you know, Paul Castellano, as head of the family instead of, you know, promoting Neil Delacroix. And he did it for a reason. I think Carlo wanted to take the family more in the business direction than the street direction. Neil Delacroix, he was a street guy. He was a tough guy. That was it. He wasn't a business guy. And Carlo wanted to take the family in a different direction. That's why he put his brother-in-law in there. So there wasn't a lot of love lost, you know, when Castellano was hit. I remember when we were in MDC, like I said, 3 days later, I got locked up and they gave me no bail. So I was in there for several months at that time. And there was a lot of talk about it. And a lot of people resented the fact that Gotti acted. A lot of people did. But a lot of people said, hey, Castellano's not going to be missed. You know, he was cheap. He was this, he was that. And then the word started to, you know, people started to not be hesitant to talk about him. But he wasn't well liked. So, but it was a big deal during our time that he was hit. You know what followed after that. Gotti was under constant scrutiny, and he decided to play it up. You know, Teflon Don, Goes to trial a couple of times, beat a couple of cases. And by the way, I think he beat 3 cases. I beat 5. So I had him beat by 2. But I wasn't the Teflon Michael. He was a Teflon Don. But intense scrutiny on him and the whole Gambino family and all 5 families in New York. We really got it. You know, the RICO statute came down on so many people. And people, I want to tell you something. I have some information and evidence that I'm going to be releasing fairly soon. Couple of things. Very dear friend of mine, Michael Sessa. He was a Colombo guy along with me. Very, very dear friend. Good guy. Vic Arena. Vic and I always didn't get along. I knew him since I was a kid. He was around my father, you know, but he was a prominent figure in that life. Well, I'm going to tell you this. They got railroaded, the both of them. And I'm going to be talking about this very soon. As a matter of fact, I want you to tune in this coming Thursday and Friday. I am going to make some revelations that are going to blow your mind. It's going to continue. How corrupt the FBI could be. How corrupt prosecutors could be. Horrible. It's going to blow you. It's going to make your hair stand on end when I get into this. And I'm telling you this. I'm going to say it straight out. There's a lot of influencers out there that create these dynamic things just to get views and clicks. I don't do that. I'm going to give you facts. I'm going to give you information. And I'm going to dare anybody that I'm talking about to sit with me on it, because I'm going to show them the proof. I'm going to accuse them to their face. Exactly. And I'm talking about prosecutors and ex-FBI agents, and maybe current FBI agents, Comey being one of them. A couple of them that are still around that caused some tremendous damage during their time as a prosecutor, as an FBI agent. As a matter of fact, the whole Colombo war that started afterwards was a result of FBI instigating that war through somebody I knew very well, a government informant. Didn't know it at the time, Greg Scarpa Sr. It's going to blow your mind, people. I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. And I've just come across this information, and it just really hit me, because for a while I didn't believe it. I said, no. But then the evidence started coming out, and I'm going to be sitting down with somebody very soon who's going to tell you the story, and it's going to blow your mind. The FBI had information that could have saved lives, and they sat on it because they didn't want to destroy some of the cases that they had brought forward, because the information would destroy their cases, because their cases were built on lies, and they didn't want to ruin that. And they allowed people to die as a result of that. That was back then. I'm not talking about the current FBI. That was back then. So when people say to me, Michael, you know, you may not believe this thing about government. Are you kidding me? I wrote the book, Mafia Democracy. I know what these people are capable of. I know what the Department of Justice is capable of when they have corrupt people in their leadership. I understand it more than anybody. My family was victimized by that, so I get it. But I bring facts and I bring evidence. I don't bring hearsay. I don't bring innuendo. I bring facts and I bring evidence. So, one of the very significant days, stay tuned. I want you to stay tuned this Thursday. It's coming out. And Friday, 2 very, very important videos that I'm bringing forward, and there's going to be a follow-up to all of it. And yes, it's all mob related for all you people, but it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that. It's going to go beyond how innocent people were killed as a result of corruption in the highest levels of our government, our Department of Justice, I should say. Terrible people, terrible. And the only way to stop this is by holding people accountable. And I said this, I'm going to say it again. You know what? The Mafia, we were amateurs compared to what goes on when there's a corrupt Department of Justice official. Amateurs, because they destroy lives. We might have destroyed our own lives. That's up to us. We fed on each other. Yeah, okay. But innocent lives are being destroyed as a result of corruption in the Department of Justice, in different agencies under the control of the Department of Justice. It's disgusting. Some of these people are the scum of the earth, and I'm saying it, I'm sorry. But when you hear what happened, you'll understand that. And I guess, you know, very significant day. 40 years ago today, Paul Castellano was killed, Shockwaves. We're going to get into it a little bit further. So, again, you know, an anniversary, an infamous anniversary, but a day that so many people that are into the mom genre and understand it are aware of. But I made some very, very definitive declarations right now, and I'm going to back it up, people. I'm going to absolutely back it up. And I've done my homework. I've done my research. I've got my evidence. And there's going to be more to this. More to it coming up. All right, my friends, how do I always leave you? Same way, never going to change. Be safe. Please be safe. Watch your surroundings. Be healthy. I think it's great that more people are talking about being healthy than ever before. At least that's what I am seeing. That's what I'm witnessing. Be safe, be healthy. God bless each and every one of you. Enjoy the Christmas season. Enjoy it. It's a blessed time of the year, hopefully for most. And yeah. I'll see you next time. Oh, wait a minute. I forgot. God bless you, your families, your loved ones, your neighborhoods, and your communities. God bless America. And yes, I'll see you next time. Take care.